So, hello everyone. My name is Yoav Kutner, like I heard that they introduced me, so thank you for that. I hope it was kind words because I didn't understand what you said. I co-founded Magento, and I was the acting CTO for a long time until I left earlier this year, and I was also in charge of Magento both on product and technology for a long time. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I have my handle, Yoav Magento. I post all kinds of things that have to do with e-commerce and Magento there, so if you want to follow me in there. But today I'm here actually to talk to you about the road, the journey that we made in order to come to where we are today, and how Magento started, where we came from, and how this idea even took place and became what it is today. And sometimes this road, this journey that we took, and I hope this picture is, it's not that good of a quality, but this picture is a real picture that I took traveling from one office in Ukraine to another office in Ukraine where we have developers. And it was after a very bad winter, and the road was gone, there was no road. And sometimes our journey felt the same way. We felt like we don't know the way, we don't know where we're going, and we couldn't see it. But other times, it felt like we were on this open freeway, that we're just bound for success. And this is a true picture taken in Los Angeles on the 405 freeway, one of the most busiest freeways in Los Angeles. And they did some construction work, so they shut it down. They called it Carmageddon. And some people did some funny photos on that. This is one of them. But usually 405 looks like this. And this is how it looks every day, almost all the time. And sometimes our road looked or felt the same way. It felt like we couldn't move fast enough. There was too many obstacles in the way, and we couldn't get there fast enough. But most of the time, it felt like driving a Porsche on the Autobahn, going 300 kilometers an hour. It was really fast. But let's start from the beginning. Let's plan this trip. Let's see where we're going, and build this adventure. Start figuring out who we're going to travel with. So while I prepared this talk, I looked at the website for traveling, and I looked, how do you choose a partner for travel? And some of these things apply a lot when you're trying to start a business or a project. It's very similar things. You want to seek somebody that's going to be a partner that has and shares the same common interests as you. If you don't, you're just not going to be interesting to each other. You want to discuss your trip budget, when and where you want to get and when you want to get there, because if you're not aligned, you're going to probably not be that good of a partner doing your business. And review your ideal itinerary. Figure out when you want to get somewhere and make sure that matches. Sometimes partners get there and somebody wants to take 10 years, somebody wants to get 3 months and get out of there. So you want to match and make sure that you're on the same kind of schedule. Try short trips first, right? Try something short, try a small project, make sure that you're working together good and you're getting used to each other before you head on this big, big project, because if you're not having your right partner, you're not going to succeed. And if it's hard to find somebody, sometimes you find your partner in the most unexpected places. So today, social networks, I'm actually working with a lot of startups today. And when I hear the story of how the startups started, where partners came from, it's always surprising how they met. And you never know when you're going to find your right partner. I was actually very lucky, and my partner was Roy Rubin. We actually met while attending UCLA for the first time. He was an economics major, I was in computer science, and a mutual friend of ours introduced us to each other. Initially, we were not so aligned. I was really not into web technology. I didn't want to do web, I wanted to do anything else but web. But things happened, and a year later we met again, and we actually joined and started Varian. We actually started sitting in this very, very small room, 5 meters by 5 meters, and we were almost sitting back to back. The funny thing I had to get used to is that Roy never talked to me, always sent me instant messaging. I don't know why. The other funny thing is if a customer used to come and visit us, one of us had to leave the room because it was too small. So. But then the company started growing. We actually named the company Varian. And during the Varian days and long nights as well, we used to do basically anything that people asked us to do that was related to web development. We did a lot of intranets, custom CMSs, custom websites. One intranet that we built was for a loan company that was issuing loans for homes in the US. This is 2004. And we created this intranet that allowed them to process loans much, much faster all over the US. So for some reason, we take some responsibility for the home issue that happened in the US, but not too much. But then we slowly started focusing on e-commerce. E-commerce became what we were doing. We were getting more and more requests for that, and we were getting good at that. And while we moved forward, we started working with Fortune 500 companies that started reaching out to us to create small sites, internet top retailers that contacted us for e-commerce sites, and we created it for them. And that seems like that would be a good thing to do. We even created one website or an application that took us a few years that started from one OS Commerce site, but ended up with 18 international web stores, with a custom online call center with about 100 people using it at any given time, and 25 point-of-sale systems that were traveling, web-based point-of-sale system traveling around the US. And it all started from one OS Commerce site. We just worked on it for many, many years. And we used open source. We constantly used open source, but we didn't really think about why are we using open source. We just used it because it was free. It was there, we could use it, and it answered all the requirements that we had, and it was flexible. Meaning that when customers called us and said, can you do that? Our answer was always, yes, we can. Right? We said it before Obama, by the way. So. And because we were using open source technologies, we could say that. We could say, we can do anything you want because we have the flexibility to do so. And moreover, without any licensing cost, right? I mean, we didn't charge our customers for licensing. We didn't have to resell to them anything. We just used them. They paid for our time to develop what they asked us to. And actually, our claim to fame, actually, in that time, the one thing that made us famous was actually that, not from technology. We actually did a redesign for Zend, the PHP company. We redesigned their Zend framework website and their website, and we got credit for that. We contributed to them. And everybody thought that we were a design agency for a long time. But that's how people started learning about Variant. The other thing we had was a blog about e-commerce, one of the only ones around that time. And we started gaining a lot of visibility as one of the e-commerce companies of the time. So we started gaining a name for ourselves in that. So I mentioned that we were using open source. And open source is a philosophy, but I'm not a philosopher, and I'm not going to start getting into these philosophical issues. But the idea is, a very basic idea. People want to share how and what they did and how they did it, so other people can enjoy it and use it and extend it and implement other new things about it. It especially applies for software, open source software. And the idea is simple. You get the source code, you see how things are implemented, and you can customize, extend them, etc. But if you look at the opensource.org site and then their definition, it's not only access to the source code. It has to do with how do you redistribute the software. It's actually mostly has to do with how you redistribute the software, because if the source code is open, but you can't do anything with it, that doesn't help you, right? So it's very important, again, that open source allows you to redistribute your work, basically, and extend it and then use it. But open does not mean free. And again, this is a big argument going on around the world and people trying to understand what this means. But in a simple term, it means that even though the software is free, it doesn't mean that it will cost you nothing to get where you want to go and do what you want to do. The idea, again, is that you might, if you want to do it on your own, you're going to invest your own time in learning how to create an application, how it works, how to customize it. You'll need to learn PHP, etc. So you're going to invest some time. You might hire somebody, right? And you have to pay them. So open does not mean free. And there's a story that I keep on when people talk to me about this. Andy Gutman, CEO of Zend, the PHP company again, when we started this off, he told us, I'm warning you, I'm telling you, people that use open source, if you would go and give them each $10, here, $10 to each one of you, they will turn around immediately and say, why don't you give me $20? If you give me 10, give me 20. And the same thing applies on open source. There's never enough that you can do for them that they won't ask for more. And the idea is, again, it never ends. So if you choose open source technologies, you're going to pay some time, some money, but it's going to cost you something. And that's important to keep in mind. On the other hand, it does not compare to licensing. And the freedom that you get and the ability to have no vendor locking, you can choose who you want to work with at any given time, which is a big plus. So at Variant, again, we were using a lot of open source, didn't really think about it. The most obvious ones that we were using was LAMP, right? Linux and Apache to run our applications, MySQL and PHP to build them. And again, they were working. We actually never thought about it too much as a big deal. Slowly, like I said, we started focusing on e-commerce, and we worked with different open source tools, but we found one that was especially answering everything we were looking for, and that's OS Commerce. How many of you know OS Commerce here? Not that many today, okay. There was a time in 2004 that this was the most used open source platform. We were using it for a long time. Like I said, we were able to do a lot of things with it. It's originally created in Germany in 2000 by Harold Ponce de Leon. It was called the Exchange Project, and it was the best thing ever in that time if you want to do an e-commerce site. It was written in PHP 3 and converted to PHP 4 at one time, and we were using the version 2.2 of that. And we were doing so much with it. We were able to do so much. Just to start off, it gave us a lot of functionality, and then we would add and customize it. But it was kind of an old kind of architecture, different coding styles, etc. And it was a true community project. There was one leader and a bunch of people that volunteered their time. That works in many projects, but also comes with a lot of drama, a lot of egos, and it's very hard to build a business when you rely on this kind of environment. And with 2010, they actually only released their next version of 2.3, so we were using it for almost 6 years before there was a new version. And now they started recently working on their version 3.0, and I think the last release was August of 2011. They released their, and it's still not stable. So again, really good project, really good idea, but we started having some issues with that. And like every trip, you're bound to get to an intersection or a crossroad. And you have to make decisions. You have to choose the directions and commit to it and move. And like I said, we got more and more requirements. We got bigger and bigger clients. By that time, we created a new custom admin that was running with OS Commerce, and it was written with our own internal framework, PHP 4, by the way. And it was just custom features that we were building. Again, some of them were in OS Commerce, some of them were our own code, so we were getting what used to be referred to as spaghetti code, right? You get all this code mashed together, it looks differently in different files, etc. And I didn't feel comfortable. I was leading the technology at that time. We were getting customers that were paying us premium for getting an e-commerce solution, and I could not feel that we were giving them a good solution. So by that time, we had to figure out, what are we doing? Where are we moving next? The PHP community started to actually mature a lot at that time, where PHP 5 started to be worked on. And by the time we got to 2006, our company was doing really, really good as a service company. We were growing, we were hiring really talented developers. And our confidence in ourselves started growing as well. So, like many other companies, we looked around to see if there's an alternative to OS Commerce, but there was none. And we had to choose something else. And since there was nothing else, the only other alternative is to write your own. So we just decided, okay, we'll write our own. How hard can that be? Well, for some reason, because we were using open source, I went to Roy and I told him, Roy, why don't we just do it ourselves, but release it under an open source license? I mean, what's, famous sentence, what's the worst that can happen? So we'll try it. And if you think about it, what is the worst that can happen? We were trying to develop it for ourselves, use it for ourselves, and if other people use it, we're only going to gain from that. We weren't expecting to get paid for that. We didn't mean to sell it. And if other people use it, maybe they'll give us some feedback on that. Maybe they'll help us out. So we said it just makes sense to release it as open source. There's no downside to doing so. So we decided to do that. But we had to make some decisions before that. And like I said, we were a PHP company. But we started thinking about maybe we should use other technologies. Maybe PHP is not the right one. So we started looking at Java. We looked on Ruby on Rails. But at that time, Java, if you looked at any open source projects that they did, the adoption was not as high as possible. Ruby on Rails we felt was not mature enough. It was going it was still getting there. It had a lot of issues with scaling. And the bottom line is, we were a PHP company, so we knew that we had PHP developers. And we felt that if we want to maybe get adoption, we'll use PHP, and that should work. And PHP 5 came out, and there was object-oriented support for it. And we wanted to create an application from the pains that we knew from OS Commerce and working with it. We said, if we design something that's object-oriented and allows to extend it, allows to create custom modules around it, people and us, we will be able to use it better and develop better solutions on top of it. The support for encapsulation, interfaces, static methods, etc., that they were added to PHP 5 allowed us to do this with PHP. So the decision became much easier. The one problem with selecting PHP 5 in 2006 was that historically, if we would look on PHP adoption with hosting companies, where is it easy to host new version, it almost never was immediate. It took maybe even a year or two before they started offering the latest version of PHP. And that's really a problem if you're talking about adoption, because who's going to use you if they cannot host it on their own? So that's a problem. But we had to take a risk. And we actually started thinking, okay, we'll develop a PHP 5 application, we'll continuously port it to PHP 4 just for adoption in case we need it. And we started doing that for a while. Very time consuming, and if you find it, there is a version of Magento written in PHP 4 out there, I promise you. But the idea is, again, we took a risk, and I think when they announced end of life for PHP 4, it made our decision much easier. The other thing we started learning is that once we started releasing Magento, the request for PHP 5 from hosting companies was so large that they adopted immediately. And this fear never happened. PHP 5 was available almost to anybody that wanted it. Some losses when or some things we could have done better when it comes to Magento, I think, and the decisions we made was, first and foremost, documentation. We didn't take the time to write good documentation. And if today we would have to do it all over again, and we're doing it with Magento 2, documentation is important. Tutorials, how to start, how to create a module. The more documentation you have, the easier it is for people to adopt your technology. I think another very big loss or miss that we had was unit testing, continuous integration, etc. The issue with that was that we really tried to have that, but PHP community was not ready for it, our developers were not ready for it, and unfortunately we decided to move on without it. In Magento 2, again, it was one of the requirements. We had full unit testing, or as much as we can have coverage, or they're working on, and continuous integration built into that. So like I mentioned, we were working at Varian, and we were using our own homegrown framework like many other companies, PHP 4. But there's problems associated with that. How do we create and work on our own framework constantly? There was problems when we were trying to hire new people. How do you come and tell them you need to know our framework when they don't know what you do? So finding new developers meant that we had to train them, and it took a long time for them to learn because it was new technology. We started working on bigger projects, and collaborating with companies was hard because they came with their framework, we came with their framework, and more people came with different things, and it was really hard to communicate. It was like, talking different languages almost. And then also maintaining it. We were the only ones using it. We were the only ones maintaining it. And nobody helped us. There was no collective wisdom telling us how the right thing to do something. And like I mentioned, coding styles. Everybody was writing PHP differently at that time. So we had to think about it. And that time, in 2006, I'm reminding you, we called it the PHP framework era, right? It was almost like every week a new framework appeared, a new method of writing the best way to write PHP applications. And seriously, this is just a short list of all of the frameworks that came out that time. And we had to make a decision, which one is the best. And working through this list is not an easy thing, that's for sure. But then there was an announcement, or a little bit earlier, there was an announcement about the Zend framework. And it answered a lot of our issues that we were looking for. First of all, it was a commercial company behind it, right? They told Zend, which is the PHP company, and we selected Zend framework when it was still in beta. To do such a decision, we're building a business, we're building a product, and we're using a beta product, right? To build that, we would only do that if we know that there's a commercial company and they commit to us that they're investing money in it, they're committed to doing it, and we know that it will succeed. They had a very, very big community behind them, even when they started. The hype around Zend framework was huge. So we knew that it's going to have some momentum behind it. A lot of documentation, a lot of training, helping our developers learn and helping other developers that want to learn Magento to get there, because they could use this documentation and learn. And another important thing was the use-at-will architecture that they had. It allowed us to select components that we wanted. And again, because it was in beta, not everything worked, or not everything was as flexible as we wanted. And we ended up using a lot, but also building some custom components that Magento used, Zend framework didn't have at the time. And they had the clear roadmap, meaning that we knew when they're going to release it, we knew they're going to be available when. And again, because there were a company behind it, they committed to that. And that helped us a lot, because we basically selected the beta product and said, we're going to release our product this date, and we could only do that because we knew the roadmap, and we knew when to expect the first stable. So that really helped. And one of the most important is open source licensing, which is basically a way to protect the ecosystem that would be built around Magento. So when you build your own custom implementation or your own website, you're not going to get any legal issues from that. One thing that is not so known is that I actually selected it from the marketing point of view. The hype around Zend framework was so big that gave us such a big push. I mean, We looked around and there was no really application. There was a lot of hype, there was a lot of development done on Zen framework, but no real implementation of the framework to show how it really works. So when we started working with that, Zen contacted us and they asked us, can we do a case study about Magento? We said, sure, why not? And we were placed between IBM and Microsoft, this small company, Varian. So everybody started, what is Varian? So more people came. I think we got about 10,000 new community members just when we got this posting. So it gave us a lot of marketing, free publicity. So this is the time frame, and I hope you can see the slide, but the idea is this is the time frame that it took us to, or the first year and a half that we worked on Magento. Like I said, we started in 2006 by selecting the actual framework, understanding what we want to do, deciding that we want to do this even. And in 2007, we selected 3 developers that worked with me, and we basically started doing some of the research, some of the architectural decisions, and started working on Magento. By May of 2007, we had the first internal proof of concept release, and we showed it to the company. And then from June to August, our first beta release, we actually created most of what you see today. So yes, we went through some refactoring, we added new features, but most of the architecture and everything was done by August of 2007. And the team size kept on changing, but we had these 3 core developers, plus we were adding from our services department, we were starting to cycle developers around so we could add them and they could learn Magento, they would create a feature and learn how that works, and that's how we trained our own internal people while they were still doing services. And the point is we all had day jobs. We were still a small company, we were funding ourselves, so we had to work on these projects that brought money into Varian, and on the nights and weekends we basically worked on Magento. But one thing that we did do is continuously, once we released the beta, we continuously released 12 beta releases. So we continuously were working on releasing and getting the community involved until March of 2008 when we released our first stable release. And then we continued this path. We just continued constantly releasing and releasing as we learned how the community is using the product. And pretty much like when you're on traveling and you get these unexpected turns, we had one of our own that I want to tell you about. Right before we released our first beta release, we promised the community that we're going to release it by August 31st. And we wanted to build this trust between us and the community that when we say we're going to release by a certain date, we're going to do that. So sure enough, we worked really hard, everything was ready, but we moved to a new office right before the release. And what happens is that the internet fails, right? And we're sitting there, it's 5 o'clock in the morning in LA, we want to release, everything is packaged, everything's ready, we want to upload it, and there's no internet. Calling our ISP, trying to use phones, whatever, nothing worked. And we started getting these messages on our phones from people all over the world saying, you know, in Australia, it's already the 1st of September. Where is Magento? So we were under a lot of pressure to release it. Finally, around, I think, 10 a.m., the internet was fixed, and we were able to release it. And this is the one time that living in LA's time zone makes sense, because we got much more hours. And we still committed to releasing on the 31st, so it worked. I actually found this page while I was packing my stuff before I left. And it's really hard to see, I know, but the idea is this is the real project plan for Magento. It actually lists all the features, everything we did with 3 developers and myself. That's all we were able to accomplish. And I wish I found it earlier, because every time my developers used to complain, it's too much, we need much more time. I should have just pulled this paper and showed them what they're really capable of. And it's amazing if you look back on it. So we are open, we have community, we have developers. But how do you select the features that you're going to work on? How do you do this open product management when you have so many people working with you? And we're not a community-based project, right? We're a company, right? We have limited resources. We have to select what we're working on and push back on where we don't want to create something. So how do we do this? So I argue that having such a large community is a big benefit. One story about it is that when we were working on Magento, I designed Magento to be a US-based, only for the United States based product, with ways to extend it to be used in different places around the world. We didn't expect that people all over the world will want to use this application. So we said, you know, best case, we'll build it for the US market. That's the market we know. We've been developing sites for the US for a long time. We had very small implementations in Europe, but that's what we knew, so we created it that way. When we started getting our community site up, we found out that we have more people signing up from Europe than we have from the US. So Germany, France, UK, Belgium, Netherlands, we had more people signing up there than we had in the US. So as the product manager for this project, you have to kind of scratch your head and think, did we make the right decision? Shouldn't we focus on this market a bit more? And that's what we did. The ability to know who's going to actually be your user base helped us a lot to make this decision. And almost overnight, we re-architected it, and we spent another 5 days, and we added the most important features so we can meet our release and have some of the requirements that will make Magento run in Europe, which is VAT support, prices including excluding tax. We didn't do a perfect job, but we at least allowed European people to start using Magento, and that was great. And only able to do that if you have such a big user base that's actually telling you what they're looking for. So when we were going through the due diligence with eBay, it was another part where they came and asked me, what research do you buy? What do you pay for in order to know which features to prioritize? How do you do this work? Do you have a control group, a testing group? How do you decide? And I said, I scratched my head and said, we don't have that kind of money. We don't spend money on research. I basically listened to the community. And both me and Roy, for the first 2 years, we would read every forum post that was done on the community side. We would go through thousands of them some days, just to see what the community is asking for, what the community is talking about. Where are the problems? What are they missing? What feature is going to make Magento even better for the community? And that's how we did it. We didn't rely on research. We didn't rely on market research that cost tens of thousands of dollars. We just heard what people were asking for. And of course, developing in this environment allows us to have this huge resource that gives us feedback on bugs, gives us testing of the feature. Do they like the way the feature works? Do they don't like the way the feature works? And that's huge. No other company, unless you do open source and have such a big user base, gets this kind of feedback. And security. Security is the one thing that comes up with open source. A lot of companies that don't use open source come and tell you, security is a problem with open source. If you're giving your source code, the hackers, they learn where your vulnerabilities are and they attack exactly there. Well, it's exactly the opposite. I don't believe that. I believe that every time we released Magento, because we were running with so many users and so many eyes were looking at what we're doing in our code and testing it, we heard about any vulnerability we had sooner than anybody that would work on a proprietary software would find out. And when we found it, we put it as the highest priority and we fixed it. And we got some independent companies that were testing Magento, and we scored the highest among e-commerce platforms, open source or not, when it comes to vulnerabilities. We had almost no vulnerabilities that we managed to find. And that's something that says something. If you do it in an open way and you show everybody what you're doing, it does not mean that you're more vulnerable. It actually means that you're stronger. But working with the community doesn't always work. And we learned this early on when we had a company that called us and said, we love what you're doing with Magento. We want to contribute back. We're a company that built web service API. And we loved it. We had it on our roadmap. We wanted to have web service API coverage for Magento. And they said, we'll do it for you. We spent a lot of time, we gave them resources, taught them how Magento works, but then right before our 1.0, they delivered nothing. We told them, hey guys, we really, really need it, we want to work on the release, and they didn't call us back. So that was a good lesson for us, because we learned that because we have commitment to our community, whatever we commit to, we should be responsible for. So when it comes to features in the core product, Variant will do that. If anybody wants to contribute something, if it's a feature, do it through extensions. And we drew this line because it's not only the deliverable. What happens if they would deliver it to us and then disappear? We would have to then be the one that maintain it for you, right? So it's not an easy decision. So we made this decision that Variant will be responsible for whatever you get in the core product, both for quality and for developing it. Another thing that helps is release soon and release often kind of strategy. Especially with you working with community and you get this feedback from community. You know, if you release often, if you give them your code as soon as possible and you show them what you're doing, they give you feedback earlier. So you can make sure that the release product, the stable product, is closer to where you want it to be. And that's very important. And then we also, that way we stay close to the new technology that comes out, right? Because if we release often, if we don't release once a year or every 2 years, new technology comes every day. So we were the first platform, for example, to give Google Checkout level 2 implementation built into the platform. We're the first platform to give support for Checkout by Amazon, Google Website Optimizer, and many more. Because we were able to have these fast release cycles, we were able to adopt new technologies as they came out. But again, this is a community, and you see this crowd? Each person in this crowd has his own opinions, his own agenda, pretty much like politics, right? And everybody wants to be heard. And I developed this method of, like, how do you listen to everybody? And I developed this method that worked for me. But I felt really, really guilty about it. until I had lunch with Amazon's CTO, and I was asking him, how do you deal with so much information, so much, how do you do that? And what he answered me was exactly what I was doing, so I felt much better, so I'll share that with you. The idea is simple. If I hear something for the first time, I don't really think about it. But if I hear something for the second time, I register it. Maybe it will be important. When I hear it for the third time, we look into it, and if it's something that we need to do, we prioritize. So that eliminates a lot of the noise, right? Because again, community, everybody wants their own things, their own agenda. Another thing about washing your clothes, your dirty clothes in front of everybody is that everybody knows what we're doing. We can't hide anything, for good and for bad. We released a new feature that basically made a Magento admin request RSS feed, and we pushed a notification letting the people know if there's new releases, etc. So some people started seeing on their firewalls that the Magento is making a request to magentocommerce.com. And there was this big noise about Magento is stealing your data, don't use Magento. The community stopped this and said, hold on, you're talking nonsense. If you look at the code, all they're doing is calling this RSS that pushes notification. We didn't even need to get involved. So this big story that somebody started went away by the community itself. They just looked at what we're doing and said, don't worry about it. We can't hide anything, right? We open everything, we show everybody how we do it, so we can't lie to you. And that's a good thing. So community. Sometimes when you go on the road, right, some people join you, start traveling with you, they start following, they're liking what you do. And an open source project without the community won't survive. There's no way that it will, the fact that you're giving source code and nobody wants to read it, it's like, it just doesn't work. So community is an integral part of a project. Our community is amazing, really. I'm still here only for a few days, and I want to meet some of the Brazilian community as well, but everywhere we went, people in the community were amazing. The passion that they had to Magento, that fueled our energy, right? They gave us, we felt like, okay, that's why we're doing it. And the more we went and met people, the more we saw their passion for Magento, and we were amazed by that. The Magento was creating marketing for us without we doing anything. The Go Magento, I don't know if you remember that, but Go Magento was used a lot to market Magento initially when we started. Some community member that got really, really excited next to his computer said, Go Magento, and then everybody started using it. This M sign that everybody does, this is the community started doing it, and people started taking pictures everywhere with M signs. People started wearing the logo and going to these crazy trips, doing these extreme sports, wearing the t-shirt and showing us how they do it. And the flag. The flag is something that our employees actually started. They took this flag to every interesting place that they went and took pictures with it, and then the community started doing the same. And of course, the Magento fiery sign that we have there. And this continued. I know they talked about the events here, but let me tell it from my point of view. We were still a small company, less than 100 people at the time, and these events, we had no reach, how to create an event in Germany, how to create an event in Netherlands, France. We didn't know how to do that. We actually didn't know how to do it even in the US. That's something we've never done. But the community started these events, these community-based events, and they were amazing because they allowed people from the community to get together, meet each other, collaborate. All we had to do was show up, and it was done. And a story about this one is that when we released Magento for the first time, right after the first stable release, we were invited by Zen to give the keynote speech at ZenCon, at Zen conference. And there was about, I think, 800 to 1,000 people at that conference. And I asked Roy, and I said, how long do you think before we have our own event like this? And Roy said, a whole event just for Magento? I don't think enough people will be interested. Maybe 5 years. 5 months later, I think we were in Germany and at Meet Magento with about 200 some people and a professional event, pretty much like the one you're getting here. Thomas Fleck and his team organized it, and we showed up, and I was amazed. I couldn't believe that it took only a few months for us to get there. And that was an amazing feeling. So let's walk a little bit back. And January 15, 2008, we had our beta released. We had this huge following starting, right? We had already about 50,000 community members, and we had a lot of hype around Magento. So venture capitalists heard about it, and they invited us to this event called Twist Up in Los Angeles. It's an event that they go to different cities in the US, and they talk to all startups that are in this area, and they try to see what they're doing to see if they want to invest in them. So we were very, very excited to be invited. There was some big names at that time that came there. And we set up this demo station with a computer showing what Magento is. And they were walking around, and everybody that got the demo loved what we were doing. They said, wow, you have really nice features. The design looks amazing. It's really good software. And they asked, how much do you charge for it? And we said, well, nothing, right? You go to the website, you downloaded it, you get the full source code, and you use it. And their reaction was, they didn't get it, right? They said, what do you mean you don't charge for it? What do you mean people are using it for free? How are you going to make money? Open source does not work if you're a startup. We were not a startup, but they didn't get it. We went home that night, scratching our head, and like, we should have charged for it. We should have said we're charging $10,000 for it. We went to sleep thinking about it, but we woke next morning to this news. Really, the next day, Sun acquired MySQL for $1 billion. MySQL open source database. So the point is, stick to your path. If you believe in it, it may happen, right? But this question of how do you make money, kept on haunting us. If you travel, you know that you have some money, but you're wasting more money than you have, so you start doing all these odd jobs, right? You wash dishes, you wait tables, whatever, just to make some money, but you always spend more than you have. And sooner or later, you find out that you don't have money. And we were the same way. We were doing services, but we were transferring more and more resources to focus on the product. So we were developing Magento, we were working hard, but we were not making money. So we had to start figuring out how we're doing that. VCs were hunting us, community was worried, how are you making money? Are you going to be around next year? My mom was asking me, are you sure you want to give it for free? Maybe you want to get something for it. So we had to think about it. So again, we were a services company, right? This is how services are done in Ukraine, by the way. And so we were a services company, and we wanted to think about, do we want to get back into this game of doing services around Magento? But by that time, we started getting contacted by many SI system integrators, and some of them with 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 developers. We had less than 100 people total in our company. We said, how are we going to compete? We're going to lose to these big companies on our own product, right? And we have to charge even more money because we don't have the scale that they do. And we also wanted to focus on the product. We didn't want to focus on doing custom implementation. We wanted to focus and give the best experience possible in the product and actually move our resources towards the product more and more. So we ruled out services. That's not the way we're going to make money. But we continued thinking about it, and we thought, okay, we're creating this application. It's a mission-critical application for a business, right? They're generating money, revenue coming in from the system. If you will offer support for people, they will pay for a yearly subscription to let us know that they have an issue, and we will fix it for them. Moreover, when we looked on the other companies, when they offered support, everybody was smiling, right? So if they're smiling, they must be doing good, right? And if they're doing good, we'll do the same, and we'll sell support, yearly subscription, and we'll also be happy. So we hired some person that did it before, enterprise support, and we started building the team. But guess what? It does not work. Not in open source. What happened was that people had issues. We had bugs like any other software, and they used to call us and say, okay, we found a bug in Magento, can you fix it? And we said, sure, we have this plan, you pay for 1 year in advance, you can open 50 tickets, and we'll fix it for you. And they said, wait, you want us to pay for it? We said, yeah, you're using the software for free, pay us for the support, we'll fix it. And they said, it's not that important, it actually works. And that's the fact, right? If open source works, why would you pay for support for that, right? They can live with the small quirks and bugs, and that's what they did. They said, well, just wait for your next release. You might fix it by then. So support doesn't work. So we looked around, what other open source companies do? Alfresco, Red Hat, MySQL, JBoss. What they do, they have a commercial open source, meaning that there's different ways. Again, I'm not going to get into philosophy of what it means to be an open source, commercial open source company. But the idea is that you make money from an open source product. And it's okay. It's not against anything of the definition of open source, if you think about it. And we also had very big companies like Xerox, like Ford, contacting us, wanting to use Magento. But when we told them the price tag is 0, they said, that's a problem for us. We can't use you if you don't cost money. We need to know that we have a relationship with the vendor. We need to know what's the expected cost in 5 years for us to go get it approved with our accounting. So it didn't work. Moreover, they wanted us to give them warranties on the code. They wanted us to give them, protect them from indemnification so people won't sue them for using Magento. And to do that, we had to buy insurance and we had to get paid. So they asked us, why don't you, we'll pay if you give us all these things. So that made sense, right? And we decided on a dual licensing model where we release an open source product with an open source license, but we also have pretty much the same product released with a different license, a commercial license. And some companies want that, and they pay for that. And that works. Really works. Actually works so good that we had so many brands contacting us as soon as we announced the Magento Enterprise. It took about 3 months. We created this product. We added a few features that we felt, that will make it clear, for people that will buy it. But these brands, these big brands, started calling us. We didn't even know that they're using Magento. Lenovo is one I remember specifically. They were using Magento for almost a year and a half before they contacted us telling us, hey, we saw you have an enterprise product. We want to pay for it. And we said, sure, we will explain to you about Magento. They said, we know about Magento. We've been using it for a long time. Just let us buy the license. That's what we were missing all this time. We had companies, big companies like 3M, that people from inside the company were using Magento at home. They created a website for their wives. They created a website for themselves. And when they came to work and people said, oh, we need a new e-commerce platform, they said, I have one, Magento, because I'm using it and I know it and it's great. And they were marketing it for us. We had spent $0 on marketing by that time, and we were selling more than 100 new licenses a month, which is what usually these companies do in a year if you're in the enterprise software business. And we were investing nothing. Well, not really, right? Because our open source product became our marketing tool. So when people asked us, do you invest in marketing? We said, yes, we invest in our product, in our open source product. We invest in our community website, and that's how we do our marketing. We never spent any other money on marketing, which is an amazing thing. Let's go back to our journey. And when you're traveling, you have to share the road with other people. And in Los Angeles, we have a lot of traffic. I learned now that in Sao Paulo, you have a lot of traffic too. But in Los Angeles, we also have something called road rage, because people are sitting so much in their car, they're very upset, and they get sometimes even too upset and dangerous. So one time I was driving to work, and listening to some podcast on my phone, and this guy started honking behind me, blinking his lights at me. I'm like, probably just cut him off or something. I pissed him off. Well, it's a good day to die. It's sunny. Well, we'll see what happens. And then, sure enough, I stop at the next traffic light, and he stops next to me. He's giving me this international sign to open my window. I'm like, okay, that's going to be nice. I open my window, and he asks, do you work for Magento? And I'm like, excuse me? He says, do you work for Magento? And I'm like, yes. Why? Well, your license plate says Magento. You must be working for Magento. I'm like, yeah, I do. And the next thing he asked me, do you know any good Magento developers? He was building a Magento site, and he needed developers. The fact was that he recognized the brand, right, just by reading my license plate. He knew what we were doing. And this is a slide we like to look at. I mean, it's not very scientific. It doesn't mean a lot. But at one point, Magento was searched more than the term e-commerce. That meant that people that were looking for e-commerce were maybe searching for Magento first. Just something we like to look at. But if we look at more interesting trends, this is Google Trends, just looking at the search of comparing Magento to other platforms that offer e-commerce, we see that Magento worldwide is the leading search term when it comes to compared to other platforms. A nice point for us was when we surpassed OS Commerce. That was a point where we felt that maybe we're in the right direction because we're surpassing the king, right, OS Commerce. And I checked this for Brazil before coming here, and it pretty much follows the same thing like worldwide, so that's really interesting. So we mentioned free marketing that the community does. This is a research done by a community member, Tom Robert Shaw. He actually works for Minby, it's a partner of Magento. And he did on his own time, he did this research to prove if Magento really is used that much. And he went to Alexa, and he took the top 1 million websites, and he built this bot that checks if they're an e-commerce site, and if they're an e-commerce site, which platform do they use. And this research that he did, and you can actually check it out on his website, found out that about a quarter of the e-commerce websites in the top 1 million websites in the world use Magento. That's an amazing number, I think. And the fact is that we are also growing at a rate faster than any other platform. So that's Great news. More numbers, and these numbers are not the most updated numbers, so forgive me for that, but I think we're already approaching the 4 million downloads already. An independent company made research on Magento, found that about estimated $25 billion of money is circulating through Magento application worldwide. There's close to 600,000 or even more community members today, over 5,000 extensions on our marketplace. And another company did some research and found out that over 110,000 merchants transacting, meaning you can complete a credit card transaction on a website on Magento. I think the number is even bigger than that. So people started working with Magento. I don't know if you can read that or not, but people worked on Magento and they started identifying themselves as Magento developers. They're not PHP developers, they're not Zen Framework developers, they're Magento developers. So yeah, this slide was done by a community member again. And that graffiti is next to our one of our coffee machines in Ukraine, one of the dev offices. And that license plate belongs to the lead architect of Magento. He actually drives around with that license plate. So being a Magento developer means something. I actually checked a freelancer website called Elance. And I don't know if you know it or you have it here in Brazil, but it's becoming one of the biggest ones. And I looked at the trends. I just pulled the trends on Magento to see how developers in Magento are doing on a site where they publish the fact that they do Magento and how much work they can get. And we see that the number of developers that on this side is actually growing constantly. And there's about, at the point when I was doing it, about 6,500 registered Magento developers. But look at the amount of new jobs per month. Look how that number is growing. And there's not enough, you see, there's not enough, we can't fill this demand, right? There's not enough developers. The earning potential here, again, this is how much money you're going to make. Look how that is growing as well. And of course, adoption around the world. All over almost the world, you will see requests for jobs and developers that are offering solutions on Magento. I also went to another freelancer website called odesk.com and looked at their trends. About 800 new job posts per month related to Magento. Just benchmark that compared to OS Commerce, about 75. So if I would be a developer and I had to choose which platform I'm going to invest my time in learning and where there's a bigger potential for me earning money, I would bet on Magento. So it's a good time to be a Magento developer. Maybe you can create your own mini success story by becoming a Magento developer. So we got all these Magento developers, and they were also very, very excited to start collaborating with us, right? And I told you, we learned early on that we cannot do that because we have commitment to a lot of people. So we decided that we want people to contribute, but what we want them to contribute is mostly bug fixes that they find and they fix, and some performance improvements if they find it, and of course security vulnerabilities. If they find it, we wanted them to contribute that back. We created the MCA, the Magento Contributor Agreement. I think today the good news is that it's not required anymore. I think you can start contributing freely to the project. But a lot of people wanted to contribute features, and they said, I have this killer feature, and I have this killer feature. So we said, build extensions. If you want to add features to Magento, Magento is overloaded with features. It has too many features. If you want to create a feature, create an extension. We made Magento so it's extendable. We made it modular, and we're improving it right now. Or the team is improving it right now by doing Magento 2. And we asked them to write extensions. Moreover, we told them, you can publish these extensions on Magento Connect. It's a free marketplace where you publish your extensions. And some companies doing so good with extensions that that became their business, Magento extensions. We have companies doing millions of dollars a year only from building extensions for Magento. That's, again, amazing success stories. So much so that our company started asking ourselves, maybe are we missing something? Because if these people are doing so good, why are we not doing that, right? Why are we not writing extension? And then Roy said something very strange. He said, we're in the business of leaving holes. What does that mean? That means that if we create this opportunity, people will come. If we would do everything, people would just sit back and wait for us to do it. But if we're going to allow people and leave these holes in features, etc., or they have to customize a feature, or they have to create a new feature, they will do that, and that will cause everybody to grow. So it's great being a developer at Magento, or working with Magento. But with that comes some responsibility. You're part of something really, really big. And it's not an easy application to learn, by no means. And there's not enough resources, and there's not enough training. I heard it all, I promise you. But just remember one thing, and again, it's not something we can enforce or anything, but just remember, you're part of this big ecosystem, you're part of this big community. When you do a shitty job, sorry I'm using that word, this reflects on everybody. The fact that you deliver a bad project or a bad extension, the user will not know that you did the bad work. What they're going to remember is, Magento sucks. And that's what they're going to promote, and that's what they're going to talk about. So spend the time. Learn, educate yourself. Don't go and hack it. It's not the old days where we just go into OS Commerce, find the line, replace it, copy, paste, and then you create this spaghetti code. It's worth your time, I promise you. You'll feel better about yourself. You'll be part of something very, very successful, and you saw the numbers. The ecosystem of Magento. So it's not only developers. We have system integrators. We have hosting companies. We have designers. We have a lot of people working on Magento. Just the system integrators was estimated by Forrester, which is a big research company in the US, by over $1 billion annually that is made on that, in that ecosystem. So our partners are doing good, huh? Okay. So we started thinking about it. Again, our partners are doing really well. But we noticed something very interesting. The better the ecosystem is doing, the better we are doing. Something that started coming up more and more, being an open source project, and that is forks. You'll find them sometimes on the road, maybe not looking like this, but the idea is simple. It's people that take your code and they kind of split away from what you're doing, right? They copy it and they start working on it. And then in a free community open source, usually what happens is a lot of drama involved, right? Oh my God, there's a fork, and we're forking away, and we're going to be in this name, and these groups talking, etc. And a lot of people are afraid of forks and trying to prevent them. And my argument is, forks are not that bad. Don't be afraid of forks. There's ways to deal with forks. Make a nasty fork a good fork. And how do you do that? Well, I found two really easy ways that work. One is be very attentive to why the fork happened. What was the reason that they decided to fork you? Were you missing something? Were you not listening to what they want? Maybe you did something wrong. And if you cover it, maybe the fork will go away on its own. Maybe not. But in that case, it's something you were not willing to invest anyway, and good luck to them. The other thing is to release often. We talked about it, but it also helps with forks, because a lot of time forks happen because they feel that the project is not moving fast enough to what they want to do. So if you actually release often, usually what happens, the forks go away on their own because they see that you adopted their changes and you're moving on. And they're now having to play catch up with you. And it works. Make a nasty fork work for you. Be a good fork. 2010, we went into our first partnership with eBay, and we formed the company Magento Inc. We actually named it after the product Magento, and Variant was no more. Actually required that I buy a new license plate, so I had to change my license plate from Variant to Magento. Nobody stopped me when I had Variant license plate, by the way, if you wonder. But people asked me, how did we come up with the name Magento? And the idea was that Variant, the logo of Variant, was in the color of magenta. So we said, okay, we'll say Magenta Commerce, that will be our product. But that was taken. So we looked for something a bit more cool, and we came up with Magento. That's the only reason we came up with that. We actually had a lot of problems because people would search it and find Magneto instead, but after a while it went away. And actually the logo, actually the bottom part of it, is the V of Variant, so we know where we came from. We talked about the community, we talked about the ecosystem, but these are the people that are working every day and actually are so passionate about what they're doing and about what they're providing for everybody, that just walking into our offices used to use this, to feel this energy. People used to wear Magento t-shirts, Magento logos everywhere, and we never asked them to do that. We had no uniforms. But they really wore it because they wanted to. Actually, in Ukraine, there was one event that I attended, and their kids came, and they put money together, and they bought these t-shirts for their kids that said, my mom or dad works for Magento, and I'm proud. It just, because even in Ukraine, it was a good thing to be a Magento developer. It meant something. They're creating a new product. My daughter has clothes with Magento still, even though I'm not working there anymore. She still wears these Magento t-shirts. It's just amazing. It's an amazing team, and I think, they deserve a lot of credit. I definitely appreciate everything they did for us. So just some lessons that I learned while doing it. I learned a lot of lessons. I'm not going to sit here for a few hours and tell you all of them, but I've thought about a couple that I could think about. One of them is that, like I said, I work with a lot of startups. You don't necessarily want to build a business or create a product in order to just sell it and exit, right? You want to create something that people need, something that you can build a sustainable business around it. Because guess what? A very small percentage of companies end up selling what they did, or exiting, or going public. But most companies become a small business, and if you create a real business, if you create a real value for the world, you will have a successful business, and there's nothing bad in that. Waking up every day to doing something you love is amazing. So think about it if you're starting a new venture. The next thing is patience. It's not always the destination that counts, right? It's how you get there. Enjoy it. Enjoy your time. It's once in a lifetime that you get to experience these things, and live it. Live it every day like it's what you do. If you don't like what you do, find something else to do that you're going to be passionate about. But enjoy it. And then another thing is that the destination is not always the end of the journey. So I actually had to leave Magento in April of this year. It's not how I expected things to happen. This is actually a shirt that the company did for me, and they all signed it and said goodbye. And things happen. It's not how I expected it to happen, but I'm fine with that. After I left, I did some crazy things. I went back to skateboarding. I went NASCAR racing with the core team as a going away present. I drove a Porsche with Thomas on the Autobahn in Germany. Another thing I did, I attended the wedding in France of one of our French partners that met his German wife at the Meet Magento event. And they felt that we were the reason that they met, so they invited us to join their wedding, which was very touching. But then sometimes, when you really feel that you're out, you find yourself in these weird places. And I actually found myself now wanting to work back in this ecosystem. I want to be part of this ecosystem. And I created this company now a few weeks ago called MageCore. We're going to start as a services company. We're going to use the Magento playbook. We're going to start it all over again. And we're going to offer some services. We're not going to be big. I'm not expecting to compete with any partners or take projects away from anybody. I just want to be part of this ecosystem. We're actually working on our first extension. We just want to be part of it, feel the good feelings that we felt before, and just continue being part of it. And we're working on a new product, but that I cannot talk about yet, so stay tuned and we'll find out. So obrigado, and thank you very much for having me here. I hope you have a very fruitful day. Please come and introduce yourself if you want to tell me what you're doing, how you're using Magento, how you like it, and most importantly, if you don't like it, so we can hopefully do better. And really, thank you for everything. Thank you.